Section 48 of the Junior Classics, Volume 3, Tales from Greece and Rome, edited by William Patten, 1868 to 1936. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gillian, Hendrie. Stories from Roman History, from Livy. The Story of Romulus and of Numa, by Alfred J. Church. Aeneas of Troy, coming to the land of Italy, took to wife Lavinia, daughter of King Latinus, and built him a city, which he called Lavinium, after the name of his wife. And after 30 years his son Ascanius went forth from Lavinium with much people, and built him a new city, which he called Alba. In this city reigned kings of the house and lineage of Aeneas for 12 generations. Of these kings, the 11th in descent was one Procas, who having 2 sons, Numitor and Amulius, left his kingdom, according to the custom, to Numitor the elder. But Amulius drave out his brother, and reigned in his stead. Nor was he content with this wickedness, but slew all the male children of his brother. And the daughter of his brother, that was named Rhea Silvia, he chose to be a priestess of Vesta, making as though he would do the maiden honour. But his thought was that the name of his brother should perish, for they that serve Vesta are vowed to perpetual virginity. But it came to pass that Rhea bare twin sons, whose father, it was said, was the god Mars. Very wroth was Amulius when he heard this thing. Rhea he made fast in prison, and the children he gave to certain of his servants, that they should cast them into the river. Now it chanced that at this season Tiber had overflowed his banks, neither could the servants come near to the stream of the river. Nevertheless, they did not doubt that the children would perish, for all that the overflowing of the water was neither deep nor of a swift current. Thinking then that they had duly performed the commandment of the king, they set down the babes in the flood, and departed. But after a while the flood abated, and left the basket wherein the children had been laid on dry ground. And a she-wolf, coming down from the hill to drink at the river, for the country in those days was desert and abounding in wild beasts, heard the cry of the children, and ran to them. Nor did she devour them, but gave them suck. Nay, so gentle was she, that Faustulus, the king's shepherd, chancing to go by, saw that she licked them with her tongue. This Faustulus took the children and gave them to his wife to rear, and these, when they were of age to go by themselves, were not willing to abide with the flocks and herds, but were hunters, wandering through the forests that were in those parts. And afterward, being now come to full strength, they were not content to slay wild beasts only, but would assail troops of robbers, as these were returning laden with their booty, and would divide the spoils among the shepherds. Now there was held in those days, on the hill that is now called the Palatine, a yearly festival to the god Pan. This festival King Evander first ordained, having come from Arcadia, in which land, being a land of shepherds, Pan, that is the god of shepherds, is greatly honoured. And when the young men and their company, for they had gathered a great company of shepherds about them, and led them in all matters both of business and of sport, were busy with the festival, there came upon them certain robbers that had made an ambush in the place, being very wroth by reason of the booty which they had lost. These laid hands on Remus, but Romulus they could not take, so fiercely did he fight with them. Remus, therefore, they delivered up to King Amulius, accusing him of many things, and chiefly of this, that he and his companions had invaded the land of Numitor, dealing with them in the fashion of an enemy, and carrying off much spoil. To Numitor, therefore, did the king deliver Remus, that he might put him to death. Now Faustulus had believed from the beginning that the children were of the royal house, for he knew that the babes had been cast into the river by the king's command, and the time also of his finding them agreed thereto. Nevertheless, he had not judged it expedient to open the matter before due time, but waited till occasion or necessity should arise. But now, there being such necessity, he opened the matter to Romulus. Numitor also, when he had the young man Remus in his custody, knowing that he and his brother were twins, and that the time agreed, and seeing that they were of a high spirit, bethought him of his grandsons, and indeed, having asked many questions of Remus, was come nigh to knowing of what race he was. And now also Romulus was ready to help his brother. To come openly with his whole company he dared not, for he was not a match for the power of King Amulius. But he bade sundry shepherds make their way to the palace, each as best he could, appointing to them a time at which they should meet. And now came Remus also with a troop of youths gathered together from the household of Numitor. Then did Romulus and Remus slay King Amulius. In the meanwhile Numitor gathered the youth of Alba to the citadel, crying out that they must make the place safe, for that the enemy was upon them. But when he perceived that the young men had done the deed, forthwith he called an assembly of the citizens, and set forth to them the wickedness which his brother had wrought against him, and how his grandsons had been born and bred and made known to him, and then, in order, how the tyrant had been slain, himself having counselled the deed. When he had so spoken, the young men came with their company into the midst of the assembly, and saluted him as king. To which thing the whole multitude agreeing with one consent, Numitor was established upon the throne. After this, Romulus and his brother conceived this purpose, that, leaving their grandfather to be king at Alba, they should build for themselves a new city in the place where, having been at the first left to die, they had been brought up by Faustulus the shepherd. And to this purpose many agreed, both of the men of Alba and of the Latins, and also of the shepherds that had followed them from the first, holding it for certain all of them that Alba and Lavinium would be of small account in comparison of this new city which they should build together. But while the brothers were busy with these things, there sprang up afresh the same evil thing which had before wrought such trouble in their house, even the lust of power. For though the beginnings of the strife between them were peaceful, yet did it end in great wickedness. The matter fell out in this wise. Seeing that the brothers were twins, and that neither could claim to have the preference to the other in respect of his age, it was agreed between them that the gods that were the guardians of that country should make known by means of augury which of the two they chose to give his name to the new city. Then Romulus stood on the Palatine Hill, and when there had been marked out for him a certain region of the sky, watched therein for a sign, and Remus watched in like manner, standing on the Aventine. And to Remus first came a sign, 6 vultures. But so soon as the sign had been proclaimed, there came another to Romulus, even 12 vultures. Then they that favoured Remus clamoured that the gods had chosen him for king, because he had first seen the birds, and they that favoured Romulus answered that he was to be preferred, because he had seen more in number. This dispute waxed so hot that they fell to fighting, and in the fight it chanced that Remus was slain. But some say that when Romulus had marked out the borders of the town which he would build, and had caused them to build a wall round it, Remus leapt over the wall, scorning it because it was mean and low, and that Romulus slew him, crying out, "Thus shall every man perish that shall dare to leap over my walls." Only others will have it that though he perished for this cause, Romulus slew him not, but a certain Celer. This much is certain, that Romulus gained the whole kingdom for himself, and called the city after his own name. After this, the people bethought themselves how they should get for themselves wives, for there were no women in the place. Wherefore Romulus sent ambassadors to the nations round about, praying that they should give their daughters to his people for wives. "Cities," he said, "have humble beginnings, even as all other things. Nevertheless, they that have the gods and their own valour to help become great. Now that the gods are with us, as ye know, be assured also that valour shall not be wanting." But the nations round about would not hearken to him, thinking scorn of his gathering of robbers and slaves and runaways, so that they said, "Why do ye not open a sanctuary for women also, that so ye may find fit wives for your people?" Also they feared for themselves and their children what this new city might grow to. Now when the ambassadors brought back this answer, the Romans were greatly wroth, and would take by force that which their neighbours would not give of their free will. And to the end that they might do this more easily, King Romulus appointed certain days whereon he and his people would hold a festival with games to Neptune, and to this festival he called all them that dwelt in the cities round about. But when many were gathered together, for they were fain to see what this new city might be, and were now wholly bent on the spectacle of the games, the young men of the Romans ran in upon them and carried off all such as were unwedded among the women. To these King Romulus spake kindly, saying, "The fault is not with us, but with your fathers, who dealt proudly with us, and would not give you to us in marriage. But now ye shall be held in all honour as our wives, and shall have your portion of all that we possess. Put away therefore your anger, for ye shall find us so much the better husbands than other men, as we must be to you not for husbands only, but parents also, and native country." After this, King Tatius and the Sabines came up against Rome with a great army, and first of all they gained the citadel by treachery in this manner. One Tarpeus was governor of the citadel, whose daughter, Tarpeia by name, going forth from the walls to fetch water for a sacrifice, took money from the king that she should receive certain of the soldiers within the citadel. But when they had been so received, the men cast their shields upon her, slaying her with the weight of them. This they did, either that they might be thought to have taken the place by force, or that they judged it to be well that no faith should be kept with traitors. Some also tell this tale, that the Sabines wore great bracelets of gold on their left arms, and on their left hands fair rings with precious stones therein, and that when the maiden covenanted with them that she should have for a reward that which they carried in their left hands, they cast their shields upon her. And others say that she asked for their shields, having the purpose to betray them, and for this cause was slain. Thus the Sabines had possession of the citadel, and the next day King Romulus set the battle in array on the plain that lay between the hill of the Capitol and the hill of the Palatine. And first the Romans were very eager to recover the citadel, a certain Hostilius being their leader. But when this man, fighting in the forefront of the battle, was slain, the Romans turned their backs and fled before the Sabines, even unto the gate of the Palatine. Then King Romulus, for he himself had been carried away by the crowd of them that fled, held up his sword and his spear to the heavens, and cried aloud, "O Jupiter, here in the Palatine didst thou first, by the tokens which thou sentest me, lay the foundations of my city, and lo, the Sabines have taken the citadel by wicked craft, and have crossed the valley, and are come up even hither. But if thou sufferest them so far, do thou at the least defend this place against them, and stay this shameful flight of my people. So will I build a temple for thee in this place, even a temple of Jupiter the Stayer, that may be a memorial to after generations of how thou didst this day save this city." And when he had so spoken, even as though he knew that the prayer had been heard, he cried, "Ye men of Rome, Jupiter bids you stand fast in this place and renew the battle." And when the men of Rome heard these words, it was as if a voice from heaven had spoken to them, and they stood fast. and the king himself went forward and stood among the foremost. Now the leader of the Sabines was one Curtius. This man, as he drave the Romans before him, cried out to his comrades, "See, we have conquered these men, false hosts and feeble foes that they are. Surely now they know that it is one thing to carry off maidens and another to fight with men." But whilst he boasted himself thus, King Romulus and a company of the youth rushed upon him. Now Curtius was fighting on horseback, and being thus assailed, he fled, plunging into a certain pool which lay between the Palatine Hill and the Capitol. Thus did he barely escape with his life, and the lake was called thereafter Curtius's Pool. And now the Sabines began to give way to the Romans, when suddenly the women, for whose sake they fought, having their hair loosened and their garments rent, ran in between them that fought, crying out, "Shed ye not each other's blood, ye that are fathers-in-law and sons-in-law to each other? But if ye break this bond that is between you, slay us that are the cause of this trouble, and surely it were better for us to die than to live, if we be bereaved of our fathers and of our husbands." With these words they stirred the hearts both of the chiefs and of the people, so that there was suddenly made a great silence. And afterward the leaders came forth to make a covenant, and these indeed so ordered matters that there was not peace only, but one state where there had been two. For the Sabines came to Rome and dwelt there, and King Romulus and King Tatius reigned together. Only after a while certain men of Lanuvium slew King Tatius as he was sacrificing to the gods at Lavinium, and thereafter Romulus only was king as before. When he had reigned 37 years, there befell the thing that shall now be told. On a certain day he called the people together on the field of Mars, and held a review of his army. But while he did this, there arose suddenly a great storm, with loud thunderings and very thick clouds, so that the king was hidden away from the eyes of all the people, nor indeed was he ever again seen upon the earth. And now it was needful that another king should be chosen. No man in those days was more renowned for his righteousness and piety than a certain Numa Pompilius, that dwelt at Cures in the land of the Sabines. Now it seemed at first to the Senate that the Sabines would be too powerful in the state if the king should be chosen from among them. Nevertheless, because they could not agree upon any other man, at last, with one consent, they decreed that the kingdom should be offered to him, and Numa was willing to receive it if only the gods consented, and the consent of the gods was asked in this fashion. Being led by the augur into the citadel, he sat down on a stone, with his face looking toward the south, and on his left hand sat the augur, having his head covered, and in his hand an augur's staff, which is a wand bent at the end and having no knot. Then looking toward the city and the country round about, he offered prayers to the gods, and marked out the regions of the sky, from the sun rising to the sun setting. The parts toward the south he called the right, and the parts toward the north he called the left. And he set a boundary before as far as his eye could reach. After this he took his staff in his left hand and laid his right on the head of Numa, praying in these words, "Father Jupiter, if it be thy will that this Numa Pompilius, whose head I hold, should be king of Rome, show us, I pray thee, clear tokens of this thy will within the space which I have marked out." He then named the tokens which he desired, and when they had been shown, Numa was declared to be king. Many other things did King Numa set in order for his people. First, he divided the year into 12 months, each month being according to the course of the moon, and in every 24th year another month, that the year might so agree with the course of the sun. Also he appointed certain lawful days for business, and other days on which nothing might be done. He made priests also, of whom the chief was the priest of Jupiter, to whom he gave splendid apparel and a chair of ivory. 2 other priests he made, one of Mars and the other of Quirinus, that is to say, of Romulus the god. And he chose virgins for the service of Vesta, who should keep alive the sacred fire, and 12 priests of Mars, whom he called the Salii, to be keepers of the sacred shield. This shield, men said, fell down from heaven, and that it might be kept the more safely, King Numa commanded that they should make 11 other shields like unto it. This shield and its fellows the Salii were to carry through the city, having on flowered tunics and breastplates of brass, and dancing and singing hymns. And many other things as to the worship of the gods, and the interpreting of signs, and the dealing with marvels and portents, King Numa set in order. And that the people might regard these laws and customs with the more reverence, he gave out that he had not devised them of his own wit, but that he had learnt them from a certain goddess, whose name was Egeria, whom he was wont to meet in a grove that was hard by the city. King Numa died, having reigned 43 years, and the people chose in his room one Tullus Hostilius. End of section 48. Section 49 of the Junior Classics, Volume 3, Tales from Greece and Rome, edited by William Patten, 1868 to 1936. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gillian Hendrie. The Story of Alba by Alfred J. Church. King Tullus Hostilius, being newly come to the throne, looked about for an occasion of war, for the Romans had now for a long time been at peace. Now it chanced that in those days the men of Rome and the men of Alba had a quarrel, the one against the other, the country folk being wont to cross the border and to plunder their neighbours, and that ambassadors were sent from either city to seek restitution of such things as had been carried off. King Tullus said to his ambassador, "Delay not to do your business so soon as ye shall be come to Alba," knowing that the men of Alba would certainly refuse to deliver up the things, and thinking that he could thus, with a good conscience, proclaim war against them. As for the ambassadors of Alba, when they were come to Rome, they made no haste about their business, but ate and drank, the king entertaining them with much courtesy and kindness. While therefore they feasted with him, there came back the ambassadors of Rome, telling the king how they had made demand for the things carried off, and when the men of Alba had refused to deliver them, had declared war within the space of 30 days. Which when the king heard, he called to him the ambassadors of Alba, and said to them, "Wherefore are ye come to Rome? Set forth now your mission." Then the men, not knowing what had befallen, began to make excuse, saying, "We would not willingly say aught that should displease the king, but we are constrained by them that have sent us thither. We are come to ask for the things that your country folk have carried off, and if ye will not deliver them up, we are bidden to declare war against you." To this Tullus made answer, "Now do I call to the gods to witness that ye men of Alba first refused to repair the thing that has been done amiss, and I pray them that they will bring all the blood of this war upon your heads." And with this message the men of Alba went home. After this the two cities made great preparations for war, and because the men of Troy had built Lavinium, from which some going forth had set up the city of Alba, and from the royal house of Alba had come the founder of Rome, it was as though the children would fight against their fathers. Yet it came not to this, the matter being finished without a battle. The men of Alba first marched into the land of the Romans, having with them a very great army, and pitched their camp 5 miles from the city, digging about it a deep ditch. But while they lay in this camp, their king, Cluilius, died, and a certain Mettus was made dictator in his room. Which when King Tullus heard, he became very bold, saying that the gods had smitten Cluilius for his wrongdoing, and would smite also the whole people of Alba. Whereupon he marched into the land of the Albans, leaving the enemy's camp to one side. And when these also had come forth against him, and the two armies were now drawn up in battle array, the one against the other, there came a messenger to King Tullus, saying that Mettus of Alba desired to have speech with him, having that to say to him which concerned the Romans not less than the men of Alba. Nor did King Tullus refuse to hear him, though indeed battle had pleased him better than speech. So when the king and certain nobles with him had gone forth into the open space that was between the two armies, and Mettus also with his companions had come to the same place, this last spake, saying, I have heard King Cluilius that is dead affirm that your wrongdoing, ye men of Rome, in that ye would not deliver up the things that had been carried off, was the cause of this war. Nor do I doubt but that thou, King Tullus, hast the same quarrel against us. Yet if we would speak that which is true, rather than that which has a fair show, we should, I doubt not, confess that we, though we be both kinsmen and neighbours, are driven into this war by the lust of power. Now I say not whether this be just or no. Let others look to this, for I am not king of Alba, but captain of the host only. Yet there is a matter which I would fain call to thy mind, king. Thou knowest the Etruscans, how mighty they are both by land and sea, for indeed they are nearer by far to thee at Rome than to us at Alba. Bethink thee, therefore, how, when thou shalt give the signal of battle between thy army and our army, the same Etruscans will look on, rejoicing to see us fight together, and how, when the battle is ended, they will fall upon us, having us at disadvantage. For of a truth, whether ye or we prevail, we shall have but little strength remaining to us. If therefore we be not content with the freedom that we have, but must needs set on the chance of a die, whether we shall be masters or servants, let us devise some way by which the one may win dominion over the other without great loss and shedding of blood. Now King Tullus was a great warrior, and would willingly have fought, being confident that he and his people would prevail. Nevertheless, the thing that Mettus of Alba had said pleased him, and when they came to consider the matter, there seemed by good fortune to be a way ready to their hands. There were in the army of Alba 3 brothers that had been born at one birth, whose name was Curiatius. And in the army of the Romans there were other 3, and these born likewise at one birth, whose name was Horatius. Nor was there much difference in respect either of age or of strength between the brothers of Alba and the brothers of Rome. Then King Tullus and Mettus of Alba called for the brothers and inquired of them whether they were willing to fight, each 3, for their own country, agreement being first made that that people should bear rule forever, whose champions should prevail in the battle. And as the young men were willing, a place was appointed for the battle, and a time also. But first there was made a treaty in this fashion, for the fashion of making treaties is the same always, though their conditions be different. The herald said, Wilt thou, King Tullus, that I make a treaty with the minister of the people of Alba? And when the king answered, Yea, the herald said, I will that thou give me the sacred herbs. Then the king made reply, Take them, and see that they be clean. So the herald took them, clean, from the hill of the citadel. Having done this, he said to the king, Dost thou appoint me to do the pleasure of the people of Rome, me and my implements and my attendants with me? And the king answered, So that it be without damage to the people of Rome. Then the herald appointed one Spurius to be minister, that he should take the oath, and touched his hair with the sacred herbs. And when Spurius had taken the oath, and the conditions of the treaty had been read aloud, he spake, saying, Hear thou, Jupiter, and thou also, minister of the people of Alba, and ye men of Alba. As these conditions have been duly read aloud this day, from the beginning even to the end, from these tables, and after the interpretation by which they may be the most easily understood, even so shall the Roman people abide by them. And if this people, acting by common consent, shall falsely depart from them, then do thou, O Jupiter, smite the Roman people, even as I shall smite this swine today, and smite them by so much the more strongly as thou art stronger than I. And when he had said this, he smote the swine with a knife of stone. The men of Alba also took the oath, and confirmed it after their own fashion. These things having been thus ordered, the champions made them ready for battle. And first their fellows exhorted them severally in many words, saying that the gods of their country, their countrymen also, and kinsfolk, whether they tarried at home or stood in the field, regarded their arms that day. And afterward they went forth into the space that lay between the two armies. And these sat and watched them before their camps, being quit indeed of the peril of battle, but full of care how the matter should end, seeing that so great things, even sovereignty and freedom, should be decided by the valour and good luck of so few men. Then, the signal of battle being given, the three met the three, with such courage and fierceness as though there were a whole army on either side. And as their swords rang against each other and flashed, all men trembled to see, and could scarcely speak or breathe for fear of what should happen. And for a while, in so narrow a space did the men fight, naught could be seen but how they swayed to and fro, and how the blood ran down upon the ground. But afterward it was plain to see that of the 3 Romans 2 were fallen dead upon the ground, and that of the 3 champions of Alba each man was wounded. At this sight the Alban host shouted for joy, but the men of Rome had no more any hope, but only fear, to think what should befall their one champion, that had now 3 enemies against him. Now by good luck it had so fallen out that this one had received no wound, so that, though he was no match for the 3 together, he did not doubt but that he should prevail over them severally one by one. Wherefore, that he might so meet them, dividing them the one from the other, he made a feint to fly, thinking that they would follow him each as quickly as his wound might suffer him. And so it fell out, for when he had fled now no small space from the ground where they had fought at the first, he saw looking behind him that the 3 were following him at a great distance one from the other, and that one was very near to himself. Then he turned himself and ran fiercely upon the man, and behold, even while the men of Alba cried aloud to the 2 that they should help their brother, he had slain him, and was now running toward the second. And when the men of Rome saw what had befallen, they set up a great shout, as men are wont when they have good luck beyond their hopes. And their champion made such haste to do his part, that before ever the 3rd of the Alban 3 could come up, though indeed he was close at hand, he had slain the 2nd also. And now, seeing that there remained one only on either side, there was in some sort an equality. Yet were the 2 not equal either in hope or in strength. For the champion of Rome had suffered no wound, and having overcome his foes now once and again, was full of courage. But the champion of Alba, being now spent with his wound, and wearied also with running, was, as it were, vanquished already. Nor indeed was there a battle between the 2, for the Roman cried, "One and another of my foes I have offered to the spirits of my brothers, but this 3rd will I offer to the cause for which we have fought this day, even that Rome may have the dominion over Alba. And when the champion of Alba could now scarce bear up his shield, he stood over and ran his sword downward into his throat. Afterward, as the man lay dead upon the ground, he spoiled him of his arms. Then did the men of Rome receive their champion with much rejoicing, having all the more gladness because they had been in so great fear. Afterward, each host set themselves to bury their dead, whose tombs remain to this day, each in the spot where he fell, for the 2 Romans are buried in one sepulchre nearer to Alba, and the 3 champions of Alba as you go toward Rome, but with somewhat of space between them, even as they fought. And now the men of Rome went back to the city, and Horatius went before them, carrying the spoils of the 3 whom he had slain. But at the Capine gate there met him his sister, who was betrothed to one of the champions of Alba. And when the maiden saw upon his shoulders the cloak of her betrothed, and indeed she had wrought it with her own hands, she tore her hair and cried to the dead man by name with a lamentable voice. But Horatius was wroth to hear the words of mourning on the day when he had won so great a victory, and the people rejoiced. And he drew his sword and slew the maiden, crying, "Depart hence to thy lover, with the love that thou cherishest out of season, thou that forgettest thy brethren that are dead, and thy brother that is yet alive, and thine own people also. So perish whosoever shall make lamentations for an enemy of Rome." And when the fathers and the commons saw what was done, they thought it a wicked deed, but remembered what great service the man had newly rendered to Rome. Nevertheless, they laid hands on him and took him to the king, that he should judge him. But the king, being loath to judge such a matter, or to give sentence against the man, said, "I appoint 2 men, as the law commands, who shall judge Horatius for murder." Now the law was this: if a man do murder, 2 men shall judge him. If he appeal against the 2, let the appeal be tried. If their sentence be confirmed, ye shall cover his head and scourge him within the walls or without the walls, and hang him by a rope upon the gallows. Then there were appointed 2 men according to the law, who affirmed that they could not let the man go free, whether his guilt was small or great, seeing that he had manifestly done the deed. Therefore said one of them, "Publius Horatius, we adjudge thee to be guilty of murder. Go, lictor, bind his hands." But when the lictor came and was now ready to cast the rope about him, Horatius cried, "I appeal to the people." For the king himself, being mercifully disposed to him, bade him do so. Then was there a trial before the people, in which that which most wrought upon the hearts of men was that the father of Horatius constantly affirmed that his daughter had been rightly slain. "Nay," said he, "verily, if the young man had not slain her, I had used against him my right as a father, and had condemned him to die." Then again he besought them that they should not leave him desolate and bereaved of his children, he who but the day before had had so fair a stock. Afterward, throwing his arms about the young man, he stretched out his hands to the spoils of the Curiatae, crying, "Will ye endure, men of Rome, to see him bound under the gallows and beaten with stripes, whom ye beheld but yesterday adorned with these spoils and rejoicing in his victory? Not so. Surely the men of Alba themselves had not borne to see such a sight. Go, lictor, bind his hands, though but yesterday they won so great a dominion for the people of Rome. Go, cover the head of him that made this people free. Hang him upon the accursed tree. Scourge him, whether within the walls, so that thou do it among the spoils of them that he slew, or without the walls, so that it be near to the sepulchres of the champions of Alba.
whither can ye take this youth, that the memorials of his valour shall not save him from so foul a punishment? And when the people saw the tears of the old man, and bethought them also what great courage the youth had shown in danger, they could not endure to condemn him, but regarding his valour rather than the goodness of his cause, let him go free. Only because the deed had been so manifest, a command was laid upon the father that he should make a trespass offering for his son at the public charge. Then the father, having made certain sacrifices of expiation, which are performed to this day in the house of Horatius, set up a beam across the way, and covered his son's head, and laid him beneath it. As for the maiden, they built her tomb of hewn stone in the place where she was slain. Now the men of Alba were wroth to think that the fortunes of the whole people had been thus trusted to the hands of 3 soldiers, and Mettus, being of an unstable mind, was led away to evil in his desire to do them a pleasure. And as before he had sought for peace when others were desirous of war, so now he desired war when others were minded to be at peace. But because he knew that the men of Alba were not able of their own strength to do that which they desired, he stirred up certain others of the nations round about, that they should make war openly against Rome. As for himself and his people, he proposed that they should seem indeed to be friends and allies, but should be ready for treachery when occasion served. Thereupon the men of Fidene, being colonists from Rome, and the men of Veii, promised that they would make war, and Mettus on his part promised that he would come over to them with his army in the battle. First the men of Fidene rebelled, and King Tullus marched against them, bidding Mettus come also with his army, and having crossed the river Anio, pitched his camp where Anio flows into the Tiber. And by this time the men of Veii also had come up with their army, and these were on the right wing next to the river, and the men of Fidene on the left, next to the mountains. The ordering of King Tullus was that he and his men should do battle with the men of Veii, and Mettus and the Albans with the men of Fidene. Now Mettus, as he was not minded to do right, so had no courage to do wrong boldly, and because he dared not to go over to the enemy, led his men away slowly toward the mountains. Being come thither, he set out his men in battle array, being minded to join them whom he should perceive to prevail. At first the Romans marvelled that Mettus and his men should so depart from them, and after a while they sent a messenger to the king, saying, "The men of Alba have left us." Then the king knew in his heart that there was treachery, and he vowed that he would build temples to Paleness and Panic if he should win the victory that day. Nevertheless he showed no sign of fear, but cried to the horsemen with a loud voice, that the enemy might hear, saying, "Go thou back to the battle, and bid thy comrades be of good courage. Mettus does my bidding, that he may take the men of Fidene in the rear." Also he bade the cavalry raise their spears in the air, so that the Romans might, for the most part, be hindered from seeing that the men of Alba had deserted them. And they that saw, believing what the king had said, fought with the more courage. Then there fell a great fear upon the enemy, for these also had heard the saying, which, being in the Latin tongue, was understood of the men of Fidene. They therefore, fearing lest Mettus and the army of Alba should come down from the mountains and shut them off from their town, began to give ground. And when the king had broken their array, he turned the more fiercely on the men of Veii. These also fled before him, but were hindered from escape by the river. And some, throwing away their arms, ran blindly into the water, and some, while they lingered on the bank and knew not whether they should fight or fly, so perished. Never before had the Romans so fierce a fight with their enemies. After this, the king spoke in this fashion: Men of Rome, if ever before ye had occasion to give thanks for victory won, first to the immortal gods, and secondly to your own valour, such occasion ye found in the battle of yesterday. For ye fought not only with the enemy, but with that from which there is peril greater by far, even treachery in allies. I would not have you ignorant of the truth. It was not by any ordering of mine that the men of Alba went toward the mountains. I gave no such command. Yet did I feign that I had given it to this end, that ye might not know that we were deserted, and so might fight with the better courage, and that our enemies, thinking that they should be assailed from behind, might be stricken with fear, and so fly before us. Yet I say not that all the men of Alba are guilty of this matter. They followed their captain, even as ye, men of Rome, would have followed me, whithersoever I might have led you. Mettus only is guilty. He contrived this departure, even as he brought about this war, and brake the covenant that was between Alba and Rome. And what he hath done, others may dare hereafter, if I do not so deal with him that he shall be an example for all that come after. Then the captains of hundreds, having arms in their hands, laid hold upon Mettus. After this the king spake again: May the gods bless to the people of Rome, and to me, and to you also, men of Alba, that which I propose to do. For my purpose is to carry away the people of Alba to Rome. The commons of Alba will I make citizens of Rome, and the nobles will I number among our senators. So shall there be one city and one commonwealth. When the men of Alba heard these words, all had not the same mind about the matter, but all kept silence, fearing to speak, because, being without arms, they were compassed on every side with armed men. Then said the king, Mettus, if indeed thou couldst learn faith and the keeping of treaties, I had suffered thee to live, that thou mightest have such teaching from me. But now, seeing that thy disease is past healing, thou shalt teach other men to hold in reverence the holy things which thou hast despised. For even as thou wast divided in heart between Rome and Fidene, so shall thy body be divided. Then at the king's bidding they brought 2 chariots with 4 horses harnessed to each of them. And binding the body of Mettus to the chariots, they drave the horses divers ways, so that the man was torn asunder. But because Alba was thus brought to destruction, Rome increased greatly, for the number of the citizens was increased twofold. The Gillian hill was added to the city, in which hill, that others might the more readily dwell there, the king himself commanded that they should build him a palace. Also the chief houses of Alba, as the house of Julius and of Servilius, were chosen into the Senate, and that there might be a place of meeting for the Senate being thus multiplied, the king built a temple and called it Hostilia, after his own name. Also 10 squadrons of horsemen were chosen out of the men of Alba. Now the end of King Tullus was this: there came a pestilence upon the land, and when for this cause the people were wearied of war, nevertheless the king, both because he delighted in war, and because he believed that the young men should have better health if they went abroad than if they tarried at home, gave them no rest. But after a while he also fell into a tedious sickness, which so brake him both in body and mind, that whereas in time past he thought it unworthy of a king to busy himself with matters of religion, now he gave himself up wholly to superstition, and filled the minds of his people also with the like thoughts, so that they regarded nothing but this, how they should make atonement to the gods, and so be rid of their present distress. As for the king himself, men say that reading the sacred book of King Numa, he found therein certain sacrifices, very secret and solemn, that should be done to Jupiter by such as would bring him down from heaven, and that he shut himself up to do these sacrifices, but because he set not about them rightly, or did them not in due form, there appeared to him no similitude of the immortal gods, for such he had hoped to see, but Jupiter, having great wrath at such unlawful dealings, struck him with lightning, and consumed both him and his house. End of section 49. End of the Junior Classics Volume 3.
Tales from Greece and Rome, edited by William Patten, 1868 to 1936.